understand at one point you and Michelle were close friends, is that right?
I considered her my sister.
And then what happened?
She made a mistake. Scott made a mistake.
And was that when you were with Scott, or had you guys broken up, or
No, we were still together. They made the mistake twice.
how do you feel about the fact that she's missing?
I wish you guys would find her already.
And since you and Michelle used to be so close, what do you think is going on with her?
I don't know. I don't know who she is anymore.
But as far as you know, this would be very unusual for her, right? To have just gone missing?
I don't know. I don't know Michelle anymore. I stopped knowing her a long time ago.
On May 27th, 2011, a 26-year-old woman by the name of Michelle Lee can be witnessed leaving the hospital that she was currently a nursing student at, 1 hour before her shift was scheduled to end. She can then be witnessed driving her vehicle out of the parking garage. About a half an hour after leaving the hospital, Michelle's on-site supervision and teacher became concerned about where Michelle had gone while being on the clock. She was normally very punctual, and ditching her studies abruptly was not something expected of her. So her teacher then walked out towards the parking garage, where Michelle normally parks her vehicle. She notices that Michelle's vehicle is no longer parked there, and decides to head back inside. However, before she could make it to the stairwell, she believed she could see Michelle's vehicle pulling back into the garage. She runs closer to the vehicle to confirm that this is indeed Michelle returning. She was unable to see inside the vehicle, but was confident that this was Michelle's car, so the teacher begins to wave. Michelle's vehicle then immediately stops, shifts into reverse, and speeds away, leaving the parking garage again. This encounter was dramatic enough to cause concern, and so Michelle's teacher then dials 911. Officers made several attempts to contact Michelle via phone calls, text messages, and emails. All of these attempts were ignored, so investigators then reached out to any friends or family of Michelle to inquire if they knew her whereabouts. Michelle's closest family members lived about 8 hours away. They stated that they tried to contact Michelle as well, but had no luck at all. Any of Michelle's friends stated the exact same thing. One friend even told officers that Michelle had planned a trip to Reno, and that the departure date was actually the day after Michelle went missing. And so, officers became even more concerned, and the investigation slightly ramped up. Michelle's vehicle was located the following day parked approximately 10 minutes away from the hospital. It was discovered parked and locked in an area by the name of Ponderosa Court. From the outside view, Michelle's vehicle appeared to be very clean, and by looking through the windows, everything appeared to be normal. By this point, copious amounts of phone calls and messages were made or sent to Michelle and left completely unanswered. So, Michelle's closest relatives decided to make the 8-hour trip to dedicate more energy to the search. It wasn't until a few days later that Michelle finally replied. Michelle then apparently went on a text message response to her and replied to many other messages in a similar way. These messages appeared to be robotic and emotionless, so friends and family of Michelle became even more concerned after receiving them. Police then took each of Michelle's individual responses and compared them with each other. They found a series of duplicate texts, as well as a common theme amongst each text being, "Leave me alone, I am fine." The messages from Michelle's phone then suddenly stopped, and the officers felt certain that the operator of Michelle's phone was not Michelle. Investigators then decided to focus their efforts on the people that knew Michelle best, her family and her friends. They asked if Michelle had a history with any abusive boyfriends. They asked if Michelle had any business deals go awry, and then they asked if Michelle possibly upset anybody that they knew of. They then received a name. This is Giselle Esteban. Michelle and Esteban had been friends for many years, originally meeting when they both attended Mount Carmel High School together, and then later both attending the same college together. Esteban was known amongst Michelle's family and was at one point considered an extremely close friend, until the last year or so when she started to appear jealous of Michelle. The problem arose when Esteban began dating one of Michelle's very brief ex-boyfriends, Scott Mirasegan. Over the course of the several years leading up to 2011, Esteban and Scott appeared to be in a fairly sturdy relationship. They would go on to have a child together and even attempt to have a little family together. Unfortunately, Esteban's love for Scott quickly went from a healthy relationship to beyond obsessed. Esteban became unstable emotionally and would lash out several times. Her insecurities escalated and she started to become slightly delusional. She would make claims that Scott was cheating on her, and eventually become obsessed with the possibility that Michelle and Scott were carrying on a sexual relationship behind her back. These claims were incredibly false. However, Esteban's delusions became worse as time went on. Scott eventually broke it off with Esteban, and Esteban angrily reacted by quickly moving 2 hours away and taking their daughter with her. Scott then took Esteban to court and was granted primary custody of their daughter in August of 2010. After the judgment regarding custody, Scott then picked up his daughter and they both returned back home. Esteban later followed in order to maintain a close relationship with her daughter. Since both Scott and Esteban frequently visited each other while sharing custody, they eventually began to have sexual relations again. Esteban then found herself to be pregnant again in late February of 2011. Investigators then took all of this information very seriously, and their focus then turned to Giselle Esteban.
We heard about Michelle Lee. Michelle?
Oh God, what about her?
She went missing last night from her work.
Okay.
And talking to her friends and such, we understand that you guys had a tumultuous relationship.
A tumultuous relationship? She was my best friend who slept with my then fiance. How long has she been missing?
Since yesterday.
And have you guys tried calling her? I have no idea how to help you at that point. I've actually been trying to look for her.
Since when?
Almost a week now, to tell her to stay away from my daughter.
The search continued with very little progress, and so a decision was made to offer a $20,000 reward for any information leading to the whereabouts of Michelle Lee. A handful of tips came in, but none of these tips led to any progress in the search. Investigators then made the decision to do a deeper search of Michelle's home and car. It was during these searches that investigators found enough blood to determine that Michelle Lee was likely no longer alive, and the search changed from a missing persons case to a homicide investigation. This caused investigators to handle things a little bit differently, and so they started again at the beginning. Investigators returned to the hospital that Michelle practiced and was last seen at. They began asking questions to any other staff working on that day. As it turns out, one of the nurses that was on shift that day stated that Michelle seemed to be in a rush before she left. She stated that Michelle stopped by her at about 6:45 p.m. and said that she left something in her car and she will be back in a minute. Michelle then left and never came back. The investigators then decided to do another search of the parking garage and Michelle's vehicle. They then quickly discovered more blood and a mysterious ID card for the same hospital. Michelle's co-workers were then questioned regarding the ID card, and all of them stated that they did not believe Michelle was friends with or even knew the owner of the card. And after checking the internal system, they found that this specific card was reported missing within the days before Michelle's disappearance. A second nurse working at the hospital that day gave the police another new tip. Apparently, about 35 minutes after Michelle left, a call was received by the ER department of the hospital. The caller stated that they were actually Michelle and that they needed to speak with their teacher about something. The nurse then told the caller that they could not help them as Michelle worked in an entirely different department and that they were unaware who the teacher was. The caller then replied, "It doesn't matter. Tell my teacher I'm driving around town because my dad had a heart attack and I can't figure out which hospital he's at. So I'm driving around looking for him and I won't be back today." When investigators tracked down Michelle's father, it turns out that he was actually back home in Vietnam and had not suffered any heart attacks. Many hospitals were also contacted regarding Michelle's possible attendance that evening, but this didn't lead to any progress in the search. The search for Michelle Lee was beginning to feel as if it was going cold, and so the reward was increased to $100,000, and the family made the determination to hire a private investigator to assist. Many searches took place, many tips were followed, yet Michelle Lee was still nowhere in sight. The police then decided to release Michelle's exact movements on the night of her disappearance as traced by her cell phone. She first left the hospital, did a loop around Hayward County, drove back to the hospital, reversed out of the hospital aggressively, and then last pinged driving towards remote Alameda County. Investigators were beginning to lose hope that they would be able to locate Michelle, and so they decided to focus more on the one person that they had originally been pointed towards, Giselle Esteban.
You and Michelle were close friends, is that right?
I considered her my sister.
And then what happened?
She made a mistake. Scott made a mistake.
And was that when you were with Scott, or had you guys broken up, or?
No, we were still together.
we made the mistake twice.
When was the last time that you and Michelle actually spoke?
I don't know. I only remember seeing her at the meeting.
Back in December?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And what has happened since then?
I don't know.
How do you feel about the fact that she's missing?
I wish you guys would find her already.
And since you and Michelle used to be so close, what do you think is going on with her?
I don't know. I don't know who she is anymore.
But as far as you know, this would be very unusual for her, right? To have just gone missing?
I don't know. I don't know Michelle anymore. I stopped knowing her a long time ago.
But needless to say, you don't like her.
Yeah, that's evident. That's
Okay.
very clear.
How would you classify your dislike for her?
What do you mean? I just dislike her. I don't.
I mean, do you hate her? Do you want to see something bad happen to her?
No, I just want her to stay away from my child.
Giselle Esteban sat through this entire interview attempting to appear as though she was not involved in any way. She attempted to come across angry at Michelle, yet also concerned about her well-being. However, Esteban mainly came across as emotionally void, appearing distant from her answers and almost purposely shut down, something we've seen in other interrogations.
Was you friends with her?
Yes,
Close friends?
we were good.
I mean, y'all were friends, right? Both of
Yes.
y'all are law students. You're studying to be an attorney, right?
Yes.
What kind of law do you want to go into? Criminal law?
Yes.
Civil? Is that what you want to do for a living?
Yes.
Okay.
Regardless, Giselle Esteban did not give up any important details or potential clues regarding her involvement. However, her overall demeanor definitely left investigators suspicious of her. The next move that investigators made was regarding the stolen hospital ID card that was found in Michelle's car. They tracked down exactly when and where the card was used last. Then, they pulled up the CCTV footage of those scanning locations. The person that can be seen wandering through the hospital that Michelle practiced at is none other than Giselle Esteban. This video was recorded during the days before Michelle's disappearance and appears to be Esteban canvassing the location. She had headed into the hospital very early in the morning, posing as a fellow student, and at some point got her hands on the ID card while she was still there. The owner of the ID card was actually away on vacation during the time that this video was recorded. Another recording was also discovered while investigators were following up a cell phone ping from Michelle's phone. This other video actually shows Esteban replying to a series of messages while pacing around a room. The duration of the time she spent replying to these messages appeared to line up with the times that Michelle's contacts began receiving response from Michelle's phone. So, investigators then began to assume that Esteban was using Michelle's phone during this moment, and they decided to look further into this to attempt to confirm this assumption. In the month before Michelle went missing, Giselle Esteban's ex-boyfriend and baby daddy, Scott, began feeling uncertain about Esteban's mental stability. He noticed her becoming more and more volatile when anything Michelle-related came up, and he even sat through a public outburst where Esteban tossed a hot coffee on him. Well, she called him a POS. She continued to spiral, making a plethora of unfounded accusations regarding his potential encounters with Michelle, and eventually began sending aggressive messages to both himself and Michelle. She first sent Michelle this: "If you were really anybody's friend, mine or Scott's, you would just F off and leave my family alone. But all you are is the who had nothing better to do and followed me to SF. That's all you will ever be. The who slept with other people's men and brothers because nobody wanted you. You aren't my friend. You are always just a parasite." Then she created a group message and sent both Scott and Michelle this: "You two really do deserve each other. I hope you get what you deserve. You are both pathetic. You with no dreams or goals and other chasing after. You with no dreams or goals and other chasing after someone else's dreams because she has none of her own. You are both parasites." And as if it couldn't get any worse, Scott felt threatened by Esteban while the two were with their daughter, driving and arguing one evening. and so he decided to record her.
I asked you, can we just be honest about Michelle, because she's the one issue that I really, really am having a hard time dealing with.
That's not what you said at all.
Yes! Okay,
We
well
didn't
then
talk for
fine.
days.
Starting from now, we are going to be honest about Michelle. Do you understand me? Whether you sleep with her, whether you share food with her, whether you talk to her, you will be honest with me. Look at me! You will be honest with me regarding her. Otherwise, I will take your life and hers. Mom. And you can take that to the grave with you.
Why?
Why? Because you lied about her so many times, it's hard to believe that you didn't sleep with her and lock her up. You deserve to die for your lies, as does she, and you will. If you do it again, this is your last and final warning.
Why?
Do you understand me? It's your last and final warning.
Scott then went on to file a restraining order against Esteban, complicating the two's ability to communicate or even share custody. Esteban then reacted again. She continued spiraling, believing that Scott wanted this separation just so he could spend more time with Michelle. Then, just 3 days before Michelle went missing, Esteban reached out to an old mutual friend of both her and Michelle, and repeatedly asked him for Michelle's new address. Apparently, Esteban wanted this information as she was now looking to file a restraining order against Michelle. This mutual friend claimed that he didn't know. Then, during the weeks shortly after Michelle's disappearance, Scott walked out to his vehicle. As he inched closer, he could see that somebody had broken into it. There was no damage or anything stolen. However, what he found caused him to believe he was being set up for something. He found Michelle's cell phone in the back seat of his car. Scott then immediately dialed 911. Investigators began compiling all of their data, and it appeared as if the case against Giselle Esteban was nearing complete. They managed to gather a rather large list of evidence against her, including the CCTV history showing her posing as a student the day before Michelle's disappearance, her DNA in Michelle's car and on the mysterious ID card, her cell phone GPS history aligning with the movements from Michelle's own cell phone, and the underlying potential motive of extreme jealousy.
Look at me! You will be honest with me regarding her. Otherwise, I will take your life and hers.
The final piece of evidence that led to the arrest of Giselle Esteban was a sizable amount of Michelle's blood found on Esteban's shoes. Just under 2 weeks later, the body of 26-year-old Michelle Lee was discovered in close vicinity to the location of her final cell phone ping.
Family members and volunteers looking for a missing California woman made a discovery Saturday.
One of the search party members did discover remains, and right now that's all we know. There is nothing that indicates gender with the remains. The body is decomposed.
The searchers had been looking for Michelle Lee. The 27-year-old nursing student disappeared while taking a break from classes at a Hayward hospital. Just this month, police arrested Lee's former friend Giselle Esteban. Police believe Esteban attacked Lee in the hospital's parking garage. Esteban told San Francisco television station KGO that she hated Lee because Lee was friends with the father of Esteban's 5-year-old daughter. But Esteban denied having anything to do with Lee's disappearance. Saturday's search was the 8th organized by Lee's family. The remains were found in the same area where police believe Lee's body had been dumped by the suspect. Matt Friedman, The Associated Press.
Initially, her body was unrecognizable, but her identity was later confirmed by comparing dental records. Giselle Esteban's trial began in October of 2012, and her plea was not guilty. She went on to claim that Michelle's death was accidental. Esteban claims that she was actually going through extremely high stress at the time due to the restraining order from her ex and her inability to see her daughter. So, when she approached Michelle to talk, she had a total breakdown, and things went from bad to worse very quickly. Regardless of her defense and potential hopes to receive a lesser sentence, Giselle Esteban was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Michelle Lee and was sentenced to life in prison in December of 2012.
Two local families torn apart by a murder sparked by a jealous rage.
Today, a judge sentenced Giselle Esteban to 25 years to life in prison for killing nursing student Michelle Lee.
Kimberly, the two women were once best friends here at Mount Carmel High School. Today, a judge sentenced Esteban to 25 years to life behind bars for a murder he says was cold-blooded and premeditated.
Giselle Esteban never apologized for killing San Diego nursing student Michelle Lee, convicted in October for her murder. Today, an Alameda judge says she never showed a hint of remorse.
Giselle gave birth to her and Scott's second child, well, behind bars.